Hello, everyone, and welcome to Wowhead Weekly number 285. We had some big news, big bomb that just dropped on us here today about Bobby Kotick, sorry, and the news surrounding Activision, which we will definitely cover during this show. This has somewhat overshadowed, but we're not forgetting that 9.2 preview also came out. The developer preview came out, and it is all a lot to take in, um, as you can hear. Before we jump into anything, let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Annie, or also known as Annie Fuchsia, and I'm mainly a streamer on Twitch. My co host is the Wowhead site director herself, Perculia.
I'm Perk. Pretty busy week of news today for the show. We thought it would just be our patch 9.2 initial reactions, and then we had this news bomb kind of drop where the Wall Street Journal revealed that Bobby Kotick was being negligent about harassment claims, and Jen O'Neill left for some not great reasons at Blizzard, perhaps. So definitely just a lot of news to both cover, but also just to react to because it's a very heavy, topic that hits close to home. So I
It
think we're
really
gonna cover the
does.
Blizzard stuff first, and then react to 9.2, which I mean, it does feel weird in a way talking about something really bad the executives are doing and then kind of nitpicking 9.2. It feels weird, but I think it's also good to discuss what seems to be working with 9.2, what could be improved. I think that still has merit for the game being good, which is why we're all fans in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, we just have to separate the
yeah.
two topics and talk about them isolated from each other, since it
Yeah.
is to do with two different groups of people. One is the developers who are working on the game and getting the patches out, and one is on executive level. So it
Mm-hmm.
will be it's two completely different levels. So we'll try to keep them separate and yeah, start with the 9.2 stuff, which also happened earlier. So it makes sense from a chronological point of view as well.
Sure. Yeah, just we can just jump around the notes. So yeah, so 9.2, Eternity's End was revealed roughly 5 days ago, and we had the 10-minute video announcing things, followed by many systems details in foreign language interviews. So the actual video itself highlighted the zone, did a lot of explaining of the zone as it's like a very sort of cosmic, complicated concept. Talked about some of the mystical beings we're gonna find in Zareth Mortis, and teased the new raid and tier sets. So, when you saw this initial preview, what did you think of it? What were your first thoughts on, how it looked, or what they chose to focus on, all that stuff?
So I actually felt pretty pretty positive, if I'm going to be completely honest, because so I've never been like a huge lore enthusiast in the same way that I know a lot of people are, including Perk here, of course. So without talking about the lore direction of things, what I saw were visuals that looked stunning. The Warcraft art team has always been, on point with anything that they've created. The mention of tier sets, the no mention of new systems, and also what else did we hear about? Um,
We heard about the raid, and there was the Anduin teaser and stuff.
yeah, like little teasers here and there. I think in general it felt okay. I mean, it was a pretty short and I mean, it was 10 minutes, but it felt shorter, mostly because I guess a lot of it was talking. Um, there wasn't that much new stuff. I think it was good for what it is. It was good as a teaser for what 9.2 would be. I'm not sure what I could have expected more to put into it. Um, I know a lot of people felt like PvP was completely ignored, and I initially thought, well, what are you supposed to announce for PvP? Because what are you gonna say? Like, yay, new season. With Mythic Plus, they mentioned Tazavesh being split up, so it makes sense. And I didn't think there would be anything to say for PvP, but then later on, they did announce the solo queue being a brawl, and they also announced two new maps coming. So now hearing that, I'm surprised that they did not include PvP into this teaser, just to make sure that they're including, everybody's interests. But yeah, from like a general point of view of just seeing, new mounts, new pets, general scenery looking pretty, it felt like a decent teaser. It didn't do much. It wasn't full of meat on bone. But it was what I could expect from a teaser. And I'm really glad also that tier sets was mentioned. But I know from a lore perspective, I can't say that much. I actually wanted to hear more what you have to say on that.
I think it was good how there was a new range of faces discussing it. I think it was good to give like a fresh perspective, seeing more
With how it's
people from
presented, yeah.
behind the scenes. So I
Mm-hmm.
thought that was really cool. And I think that the new zone looked really cool as well. I know some people were saying it looked a bit like far out compared to past things in Azeroth, but it kind of gave me like vibes of like Outland, like the Grand with the floating trees, and also a lot of Titan elements.
That's true.
So
Mm-hmm.
I think that it looks really cool, and we needed that bright color palette to contrast with
The Maw.
Torghast and Sanctum and the Maw and everything
Yeah.
being the same dark color and spikes. So I think it's cool what the art team is trying to do, and all like the little prototype animals with their silver armor. I think that is very interesting as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we can discuss the lore a little more in depth with the notes, but I think what was a little difficult for me to wrap my head around was
Mm-hmm.
how the lore was presented as like this is the final chapter of a story arc we began in Warcraft 3, and right at the very, like, we didn't hear anything really about the jailer or the Shadowlands until this expansion, and then all of a sudden we go to the afterlife, and now we're leaving the afterlife to go to
This is the
like
end.
a like behind the scenes of the afterlife, where it's like they make afterlives. Like, to me, I'm not really sure if you can say this is the culmination to Warcraft 3, because yes, we are seeing what's happening to characters later on, but there's like a bunch of new stuff suddenly at the end, and the pacing and the world building has like really changed and accelerated. So like, you have 20 years of
Mm-hmm.
like Azeroth and like slow character development for like Sylvanas and Arthas, and now it's just like we're going to like the creation realm of the afterlife cosmos Marvel universe.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it feels it's like, how can we say this is the end of Warcraft 3 when like the jailer probably did not exist at the start of Warcraft 3? And it
When
kind
would
of
you
reminded
say?
me.
You can
I
go
mean,
ahead.
I sort of reminded me of how Final Fantasy was trying to say that the upcoming expansion was like the end of a narrative arc, except that seemed to have like more legitimate build up. And
Mm-hmm.
this was sort of like the same marketing language, but it didn't ring as true to me. Like, I can see this being the finale of Shadowlands for sure, the
Yeah.
third major patch, but I can't see this as like the culmination of 20 years of
No,
story.
because a
So,
large part of it is, like you said, the jailer who we just got to know. So it
right.
doesn't make sense to call it the ending of an arc coming from Warcraft 3. In your opinion, when would you say the ending of Warcraft 3 kind of happened in World of Warcraft? When would you
So,
draw
I
that
mean,
line?
so I think that Wrath was an interesting like ending point, because we saw the end of Arthas, and then we had the follow-ups with Sylvanas, Jaina. I think that Blizzard's narrative like tech wasn't as sophisticated as it is now, so
Mm-hmm.
maybe looking back, Wrath needed more of like a build-up and epilogue. But I do think that Wrath kind of culminated like maybe like the old school vision for the characters, and then they try to continue it by having like Sylvanas have this mysterious deal and change her personality in Cataclysm, and uh the peace between Alliance and Horde fall apart once again. But yeah, I think that Wrath kind of, to me, felt like the natural wrapping up of the core Warcraft 3 arc.
Yes, since the
Um,
Frozen Throne is also mentioned and everything, so everything is
yeah.
still relevant. Whereas now we have a lot of new things, a lot of new additions, which makes it feel like a different story in a way. So
Yeah.
yeah, I completely agree that it's kind of weird to use it as a marketing line that it's the end
Mm.
of something when there's been so many different beginnings during the entire time. And do you think it came from Final Fantasy doing it?
I think that it was, I think a mix of Final Fantasy as well. I mean, this could have been filmed in advance, but I think that between a Final Fantasy and like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I don't know how big it is in Sweden, but it's like, really big in the US, and just like this sense of, story arcs, and like the Infinity Stones, and like this is wrapping up, one big arc with these superheroes, and now there's another arc following different characters, and like everything is very cosmic on a big level with shocking reveals. I think it's definitely inspired by Marvel, and like the jailer is kind of like, Thanos in a sense, like, the
Yeah.
Covenant sigils, the Infinity Stones. There's definitely a lot of parallels there, and I think maybe they're influenced by that more than Final Fantasy, but definitely unfortunate timing how Final Fantasy is taking the same narrative soundbite for their expansion marketing. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, but I mean, like, I think by itself, I feel like it's sort of a similar problem in BFA where, BFA was like a faction war, but then it was Ashara, and then it was Old God suddenly at the end.
Old
I feel
gods,
like
yeah.
in Shadowlands, they finally sold us on the concept of different afterlives, which is very foreign. They introduced this jailer we never heard of. And like once we started getting comfortable with that dynamic, it's like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to go to the, behind the scenes of the afterlife. Like we're not going to go to a different afterlife realm. We're going to go to like a first one's realm. Like I feel like there's a lot of jumping around for concepts that could use a lot more like world building, whether they're zones or quests or narrative
Yeah,
updates.
yeah.
So
And also another thing too is another reason why it's a stretch to call it the ending of something,
mm,
when so many different people working on the story has probably changed over the years as well,
yeah,
because it's been such a long time. So I think it's quite a strong statement to make of a story when, I mean, maybe if I'm gonna try to imagine what they're thinking by saying
hmm,
this, maybe what they feel is that they have been forced into a story and have been forced to build it on and dragging the Sylvana story on, for example,
mm,
making a jailer trying to explain how he's apparently always been there. Maybe for them what they feel like with a new beginning is not do that and rather just focus on new stories. Maybe for whatever reason, some of the story writers have felt like they were forced to keep some of these characters. Um, but maybe
maybe
that's
they
going to
feel
change.
like, yeah, maybe this is a way to signal like, hey, the ongoing plot of not knowing what Sylvanas is up to, you know,
Yeah.
that will end at some point. Like, the next expansion will not be guessing what Sylvanas is doing. We'll focus on other characters, which, I think that is actually
Yeah.
fair because I think people are very fatigued by Sylvanas. So,
And she's also a very
yeah.
old character. So maybe
Yeah.
they relate her stories to do with, really old, well, the beginning in a way. And they're reaching a point where they want to sort of end it. They don't want the story anymore to be about Sylvana's. Maybe
Yeah.
they regret introducing the jailer. I don't know. Or maybe that is what's going to show us a new beginning of sorts. I'm not sure. I guess we'll see.
Yeah, I feel like, there's been so many people writing the lore, and some of the people working on it ended up being like, either they were problematic, or maybe the lore is written from an environment that wasn't totally healthy, like people's opinions not being listened to, or some of
Mm-hmm.
the lore not being as, nuanced, like Teldrassil, so maybe they're looking to the future as an opportunity not to have to invent new lore around old lore that, like,
Yeah.
maybe totally doesn't make sense or isn't sophisticated or like has this weird like baggage surrounding it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, someone thought it would be cool that Draenei would be on a spaceship, and now we have this like very like, oh, like, a spaceship crashed onto Earth. That's, I guess
Yeah.
that's, canon we have to write around. So maybe they'd
Yeah.
rather do something where they don't have to, you know,
Be
like
forced into
twist
those
the story.
stories. Yeah.
Yeah. They'd rather just do something well from scratch, which,
Yeah.
I think, I think it could be something promising to look forward to. Uh it just seems funny to be like, oh, we're wrapping up the story of Warcraft 3 because in that
It
case,
sounds really strange to say something like
yeah,
that.
I
Yeah.
feel like in that case, all of Shadowlands should, like, the entire Shadowlands expansion should have been billed as the final chapter, and the expansion should have been highlighted as that, because now it just seems really rough. Like, whoa, like I didn't even know we were telling the story of continuing Warcraft 3, and it's
Yep.
like, it feels like they should have been building that a lot closer, kind of like how Warlords of Draenor felt like a revisionist take on other parts of the franchise. Like,
Mm-hmm.
even how the cinematic for Warlords was very similar to like past in-game moments. I feel like if they wanted to brand Shadowlands as Warcraft 3, they should have been like really emphasizing like similar visuals, callbacks to Warcraft 3 that they it didn't quite materialize.
Really curious
Um,
because we
so
we still have a lot of key figures who are from Warcraft 3, and if we're gonna do sort of reboot of the story, do
mm.
you think that could be, what is that going to mean, you think? Like what kind of stories do you think could evolve, or is it impossible to say
So
because it would be completely different?
I mean, there's always it's always like what's gonna happen to Anduin. There's always
Yeah, could he be a new
th-
beginning?
I feel like he could be a new beginning. There are always the hints that like the Horde had the political turmoil and the Alliance didn't have it yet, and I could see something being set up where Anduin was the peace-loving king, but now he has a lot of trauma to sort out from his time with the jailer. Maybe that's changed his perspective on
Yeah.
things, or maybe he doesn't want to rule. And meanwhile, back at home, you have Turalyon and Ilaria, who are very like war hungry and totally fine using their powers in problematic ways to get what they want. So maybe we could have a situation where the Alliance then becomes the aggressors, and then we have BFA but with the Alliance kind of having a mess. um
Yeah.
so like, what does it mean if maybe Anduin doesn't want to serve as king? What does that mean for the government of the Alliance? Like, does it make sense that like a human always has to rule in Stormwind? The humans are not that old compared to Draenei and Night Elves. Maybe it should be a council. So I could see them going in more of that direction. And then
Hmm.
they've talked about wanting to explore different cosmic forces, and Light and Void isn't something they haven't done a lot with. Plus, Light and Void is like Turalyon and Ilaria, and we have that mystery of Drell in the Magheart Orc quest line, seeing how the light can be, not just a force for good. Right, Paw? Stop doing that. No, baby. He has his paw on the space
Oh.
bar. Um,
Oh, typing. Yeah, Luna's got her
yeah.
paw in my hand. She's taking my
Uh,
hand hostage.
but yeah, I definitely think
Mm-hmm.
that we could go back to Azeroth and have more Alliance turmoil. We can also jump around in the notes a little bit
Mm-hmm.
to on the second page, more 9.2 story hints, because there was an email a lot of people got and promoting patch 9.2, and the last line of the email was new allies, new class armor sets, and scores of new content await you in the afterlife in the next update. Prepare to face your destiny in Eternity's End. The soul of Azeroth depends on it. Um, and the soul of Azeroth is interesting because, the jailer has frequently said, death comes for the soul of your world. And, Sargeras was trying
Mm.
to destroy the world's soul when we were imprisoning him.
Mm-hmm.
Azeroth isn't just a planet. she's, this very powerful being. So maybe the jailer is trying to use this like in between realm to uh you know unmake reality, and attack Azeroth in some way. Even like Zareth Mortis, the Zareth sounds very similar to Azeroth and Azerite. So
Yep.
maybe the jailer wanted Azeroth all along, wanted to take that world soul that Sargeras wanted to destroy. He wanted this for himself. And maybe in 10.0, either the jailer will kind of win and Azeroth will be changed, or he'll be defeated, but he'll have left his mark, and we have to clean up the mess of the sword left in Silithus. Because they did say in an interview that the sword will play a role in the future. So
Wait, at what point did they say that?
it was
Was it
like
back when it happened?
It was like in Shadowlands launch that they said that the sword will still play a role, that they haven't forgotten
Interesting.
about it.
Yeah. It definitely does
So
sound like something's gonna happen to Azeroth.
yeah, and there was one of those press kit images of the jailer behind that beam, and it looked really similar to the Azerite beam in Visions of Nizak, just like rotated 90 degrees. So
Yeah.
like it was the same kind of gold with blue effects.
Yeah.
So and there was this sense of like, oh, Maw Walker or something has let you be powerful in the Maw. It's like, oh, could this be the heart of Azeroth? Like, is this meant to be a tie between the expansions? uh
Now imagine if
but yeah.
our Azerites and things like that did not get completely cancelled when the expansion is over. And
Yeah.
imagine that they were actually still useful during the expansion, and it could have tied
Yep.
together even more. But yeah, no, that's interesting though. That does sound like it could be a little bit of a hint
Yeah.
towards a restart of Azeroth of sorts, maybe complete destruction, maybe like the
Yeah.
cataclysm that ruined the Eastern Kingdoms, but
Yeah,
in
so
a
I
larger
mean,
scale.
I'm a little skeptical that Blizzard can do a full scale world revamp with how Shadowlands has been so slow and working from home in the turmoil,
That is
but
true.
I do think
Mm-hmm.
that some sort of 10.0 Azeroth reboot could make sense. Also, looking more at the lore interviews, they did say that this is the final Shadowlands story patch, but there could be smaller patches after,
Yeah.
like epilogues. So to
Yeah.
me, if there's an epilogue that hints that um we need like some transition story to get us to the next thing out of the Shadowlands.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so
So most likely getting a
yeah, great, yeah.
9.2, most likely no 9.3. I don't think they'll do a 9.3 with no, real story.
Right.
But maybe a 9.25, which will become relatively big. Maybe even a small raid that comes with it, just to sort of
Yeah,
wrap up the expansion. I think that's probably what I would expect
exactly.
with how it's going right now.
Yeah. So if we want to talk about individual characters and what they're doing in the story right now, um
Mm.
they talked about a few characters in an interview, um, and basically it seems that Sylvanas will be imprisoned in some form under us, and Uther is going to be some sort of mentor sharing common ground because they both had their soul. They
Split
both
up.
died at the hands of Arthas, had the
Mm-hmm.
soul split, and the jailer stole part of their soul, and it like they were in control of their actions, but not quite themselves.
Mm-hmm.
um, so it would be interesting to see them both interact. Um,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and I wonder if we'll finally solve the mystery of Arthas being thrown into the maw, because that's kind of where it all started. Like Uther
Yeah, we actually
threw
never
Arthas into the
saw.
maw. No
Yeah.
one seems to know anything about this or ever discuss it again. Um,
Yeah, like we saw that huge cliffhanger in a way
yeah.
in one of those first cinematics, and then we don't see anything more in Arthas at all.
Yeah, although it is funny because the quote says that Uther can serve as something of a guide for her through that process. He had no one to help guide him, but Uther understands what it's like to go through something like that. You'll see how he can help guide Sylvanas through these treacherous waters, and that's also funny thinking of Uther because it's like, no, Uther had Devos helping him, and Devos was advocating on his behalf, and all the Kyrians out for not being open-minded, and oh, we just got rid of Devos. That's unfortunate.
Yeah, that was
um,
such a mistake. It was a
yeah,
great
like I
character.
yeah, and I don't know why they had to get her out of the way. Like she seemed pretty nuanced. Like was this like
Mm-hmm.
office politics? Like one team was developing it, but another team was like better liked, and they deleted the character. I don't know. It's definitely weird though. So
Yeah,
yeah.
it was a real
Um,
shame. I mean, she even got spotlight in a cinematic, you know? It's pretty
yeah.
big. And then randomly dies in a dungeon. That was quite sad, actually.
Yeah. And then they also mentioned that um Charonda was not in the Eternity's End trailer, so people were worried that her story was done. Um and Steve Denuser confirmed that Charonda will appear in Eternity's End, and she will come face to face with a very different Sylvanas than the one from the Chains of Domination cinematic where they were fighting. And he said, I would say the
Oh.
two figures have a lot to, I don't know if resolve is the right word, because can you ever resolve something that happens on the scale of an entire civilization nearly being wiped out? There's going to be some very heavy interaction
Mm.
between those characters, and that is pivotal to the final conclusion of how Eternity's End and the Shadowlands saga wraps up. So,
Interesting. Mm. Mm-hmm.
yeah, so
So there's
that's
going to be some kind of face off, big discussion between the two.
it also is interesting when they said how this is pivotal to the final conclusion. Like you have to wonder if, uh, I mean, it seems really high stakes.
It is
One
high stakes.
second, yeah,
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, it feels like if they're hyping up such a moment like that, which is so important to a lot of people because it addresses all the night elves
Mhm.
almost being wiped out. So it can be quite a sensitive topic in a lot of ways, and it's really interesting to see
yeah,
how they decide to handle it.
yeah. Like I don't think Blizzard has done the greatest job with the nuance of the story in BFA, but also in Shadowlands, where it's like, oh, was Alune trying to help? Did she did she decide that there should be a war to kill the souls, or was it
Yep.
later on? Like it was very heavy-handed, and then like all the employees making jokes about the genocide. It's very awkward. So I
Yeah.
hope they don't do something like, and the world was going to be fine, but Tyrande couldn't bear to see Sylvanas, uh, not tortured, so Tyrande did some horrible thing, and to get vengeance. Like I hope they don't do something that because
Mm-hmm.
Tyrande couldn't free Sylvanas at the crucial moment. She couldn't forgive her. Uh, Now things are going to be chaotic for the next expansion. Like I don't think that's very fair
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
either. So yeah, I mean, I think it's good that they haven't just ended the story between those two characters, but it hasn't really I don't think genocide is just something that World of Warcraft is able to depict in a nuanced proper way in game.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is
Yeah.
the right place for it in the game. So I would I hope that they should continue the story, but I hope it's not like more harm than good. Um
Exactly.
so
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean it could also be that there's a lot of hints that Elune could be in the next expansion. So, having Chiron to play more of a role could kind of maybe bridge Elune's importance. As the Winter Queen's sister, like they are trying to give Elune more of a
Mm-hmm.
build up and reveal, but yeah, interesting there. It seems that they didn't explicitly say it, but besides Zereth Mortis, if they're talking about all these character interactions, it does seem like we're getting some new quest line with everyone, which is good to put story
Mm-hmm.
in the game as opposed to out of the game. We did this interview. We didn't do the interview. We covered it, and it was Ian basically admitting that they didn't want to put major beats in books anymore, which got a lot of attention because on one hand, it's great to hear. So like we shouldn't have to know what's going on by reading a book, but
Mm-hmm.
sometimes they can still lack context if you don't understand like the emotional like
Mm-hmm.
build up
Mm-hmm.
behind it. Like, the burning of Teldrassil was in game, but the book made it so much better, and now you can't do it in game anymore. Or like the Torghast storyline. So
Hmm.
I feel like Blizzard still hasn't gotten there quite yet about telling something
How to
enjoyable
tell
solely
it?
in game.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, like maybe it's not as bad as like, oh, the book explains how Varian is saved or why Bane's father died. Maybe there aren't major deaths happening off screen, but I do think that you know the way Teldrassil and other stories have been handled recently has not been super awesome either, so they still have a ways to go with that.
Mm-hmm.
um but yeah, so why don't we discuss the raid a bit, because that also ties into Anduin, who is another kind of fan favorite character of,
Yep.
9-2, and
Indeed.
some interesting hint with Sylvanas as well there.
Yeah.
So yeah.
The raid will have an
uh
interesting schedule. Is something that
yeah.
we haven't seen at least for a long while. Wait. Okay, let me first say what is going to happen, and
Yeah.
then I can ask Perk. Hey, Perk, did this happen before,
Okay.
and when?
Yeah.
So we're
Yeah.
having the first bosses up to Anduin as final boss in the first week when normal and heroic is available, and the final bosses are not available until the next week when Mythic opens up. And
Yeah.
that's when we will meet the jailer as well. I'm assuming.
Yeah.
And yeah, so this kind of splitting up of wings in a way. Have we seen this in a raid in any recent tiers?
Not recently. There's been variations where in the past, like Sunwell had a like resource war unlocking effort for
Mm-hmm.
some of the final bosses.
Oh
And
yeah.
then
Mm-hmm.
Wrath had the different wings opening in Ice Crown Citadel. And then
Mm-hmm.
Mop had there was the raids that were part of the same tier, but they all had very few bosses in it, and they opened at different times. Um, so it was a
Yeah.
similar effect where you could do Mogushan for a bit first, and then the other bosses of the tier later on. But we haven't done anything quite like this. And then there was a Millennium interview where game director Ian Hazakostas was clarifying that um, this can work for narrative reasons, where like with Anduin is a big story, he deserves to be like the goal at the end of the week in addition to the jailer, but also this could curb world first guilds practicing the final three bosses of the raid extensively, um, or maybe farming them week one. So it does change the competitive landscape, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, no, that's actually a very good point as well. I was going to say that I think from a story perspective, I think this is actually a good thing.
Yeah.
It feels nice to split it up like that, give, Anduin a bit more attention. I'm assuming that means that there will maybe be a cinematic after that of some sort, or at least some
I
decent
would hope
quest
so.
lines of
Yeah.
sorts with it. And then we have the second week when the final part of the raid comes out have its own sort of conclusion. I think that's really nice. A nice way to not overshadow what happens in the first part by splitting it up into two. And I saw a couple comments in chat. Is it was it 1 week of normal and heroic, and then with mythic week comes the
Sure.
final tier?
The schedule goes the first week patch 9 to outdoor content. The second week you have first 8 bosses on normal and heroic. Um and then the third week you have all bosses available on normal, heroic, mythic.
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
Ian was also hinting, I'm not exactly sure because this was all translated interviews, but something to the effect that you can't practice the final three bosses of the raid extensively on normal or heroic before engaging them on mythic.
You can or cannot.
You can't because they won't be available that first week. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then there was even some questions, but hard to translate, where people were like, "Oh, so that does that mean that they won't be on the PTR?" And
Mm-hmm.
that's still more of a question mark. But whenever the end bosses are available on heroic, there's like heroic splits to run to go to the end boss to see who
Yep.
can get like the best loot from the end boss on heroic,
Mm-hmm.
and you get super
Mm-hmm.
familiar with it on heroic, and you know,
It completely changes the
people, yeah,
dynamic if you can't spam
yeah,
heroic, basically. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
And like that first week, people are always very into the heroic kill videos of the final boss.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it definitely changes the dynamic if you can't do any practice and understand the basic mechanics of that first week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
that's actually really
uh,
interesting because one of the main
yeah,
reasons why they also do the heroic spamming is because, well, they have nothing else to do, right? In terms of getting
right.
ready for the next when Mythic opens, the
Hmm.
best way to prepare is to try whatever version of the fight that you can with the characters that you have, and then spamming heroic is the best use of your time, just getting used to all the mechanics. So not having the final bosses, this may impact the world first race quite a bit as well, which is really interesting to see how it turns out.
Yeah, definitely. Um, they didn't reveal too much about the fights, but we
Mm-hmm.
did see in the video that a bunch of lore characters were facing off against Anduin. So like we saw Uther there, we saw Jaina there, and something which was interesting was that there was an elf off to the side that was not armored, with
I
white
saw
hair,
that. Yeah.
and if you look at her the armbands, it's very similar to Sylvanis's armor, which is, it's
Interesting.
basically is Sylvanas the prisoner, and we're basically dragging her around so she because she knows domination magic, and is did we take her armor off, but and she is she like helping us now, is she willingly helping us, what does she think
Mm-hmm.
about being in this raid, does she have any of her powers, she's definitely, looking at the image, she's definitely smaller than everyone.
Yep.
So maybe, her power boost is gone now.
I
um
thought maybe it's a placeholder of sorts because it looks very
yeah,
off compared to everything else.
yeah, I mean, but I guess if she was a prisoner, they would remove like the jailer's armor from her if it's, infused with
Yeah.
like deadly magic.
Yeah.
So, um, but yeah, so I do also think that the raid visually looks more exciting than Sanctum of Domination. Uh, it
Yeah.
kind of gives me similar to like some Argus vibes, like just like very theatrical, really cool
Yeah, I
architecture.
like it.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's cool.
Mm-hmm.
So no
I got kind
complaints
of
there.
tired of the Maw Torghast aesthetic. I mean, it looks
Definitely.
cool for what it is, but it became a bit too much. We had the first Maw, then we have Torghast, and then we have the Raid, and then we have Korthia, and it's
Mhm.
like everything is dark, and I wanted something new. And I think that's also why the 9.2 developer preview felt pretty good, because it
Mm.
was a complete different aesthetic. Which felt really nice. A bit more reminding, like you said, of Nagrand. So it feels like a nicer place, and walking on water and stuff. It looked pretty neat.
So I guess I'll just, again, I feel like we're going like reverse in the notes,
Yeah,
but yeah,
we
talking
are.
about like, but yeah, I mean, I do feel like that Zereth Mortis looks really cool. I
Mm-hmm.
do think that it might have been interesting if they tried to balance the story building with the systems. Like it's always tricky, right? Because Blizzard PR could say, "Oh, we want to get the fantasy RPG players in. Let's emphasize the world building." But then you also have the lapsed players that are like tired of systems, or they're curious about the gameplay. And I think that this video was like really big on the narration, um, and didn't really talk about like interesting systems things that would appeal to people on Zereth Mortis or beyond. Like it didn't talk about solo queue. Um, or
Yeah.
like with Zereth Mortis, we pieced together through some interviews that there's the progression system cipher of the first ones, and you need to do stuff on Zereth Mortis to unlock the double legendaries, your Covenant legendary and another legendary. And I feel like
Mm.
where two legendaries through Zereth Mortis sounds kind of cool and big, but instead we're translating all these interviews, and like one interview says two legendaries and people think it's any two, and then like another interview confirms that it's a Covenant one, which then changes everything. So I definitely feel like there could have been a little more
And
like
some had to be
meat to the Zereth.
translated.
Yeah, like it could be like Zereth Mortis is like super mystical, and
Mm-hmm.
you'll do cool powerful things like equip other legendaries, even things like doing Torghast is no longer required to update your legendaries, as there's a new currency from Zereth Mortis instead. Like I just think that that's something that an alt that maybe quit in 9.1 would find interesting. Like, oh, like I don't need to go back and do this old gloomy thing. I can go to the new cool zone and you know stay up to date instead. So I think more stuff like that should have been uh included in the video.
Yeah, I am surprised that they didn't include a few more gameplay things, since it did feel mostly like a visual experience and, like you said, like a narrative. So then again, it feels like they want to put a lot of emphasis on story and lore. And I think that's the part that still is a bit confusing sometimes, because if the story is that important, why is it that things have been choppy? Why is it that
Yeah,
there's a story that introduces something which is then removed? Why
I
is
also
it that,
feel yeah,
yeah, just
I feel like
along those
like you
lines,
said,
it feels
going
like, why?
if it was a presentation emphasizing the story in the final chapter, I feel like the whole teaser should have been like Warcraft 3, the final chapter, and like, you explain more why it's the final chapter. Like maybe you have like more flashbacks from the Warcraft 3 era, and you make the whole like you make it almost like a story trailer, building up like mysteries early on 20 years ago and where they are now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, because if someone just looked at this, if they saw a picture of Zereth Mortis and then heard, oh, this is where Warcraft 3 ends, you'd be like, this looks super different than anything I saw in Warcraft 3. Like, how is this related? So I
Yeah.
think that they almost could have kind of like recapped the story so far in some ways
Mm-hmm.
to like remind people of all the cool lore beats they were hype about, and then remind them that they can see all these characters reach a satisfying conclusion in the patch. But yeah, instead
Mm-hmm.
it was like some narrative elements, but they could have doubled down more, and some systems things like we're splitting up, Tazavesh for Mythic Plus, but not big things like, solo queue, or they show this very complex looking cipher of the first one's grid that has some people overwhelmed, but they don't say the cool thing like, oh, double legendaries. So I definitely think they
Mm-hmm.
need to like work on their focus
Mm-hmm.
groups when they like who are they trying to reach with these
Mm-hmm.
videos.
And I think
Um
also, if I didn't read wrong, I think two new arena maps were also revealed, right?
yeah, that just sort of came out today. I was
Yeah,
like,
that's also
oh,
pretty
that's
big.
cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because at first when people were complaining, like, what, no PvP news, I was like, well, guys, like, if you think about it, PvP is kind of repeated content.
Mm.
Not that that makes it bad. PvP is still one of the things that I enjoy the most in World of Warcraft. But it's the biggest news for PvP, honestly, is balancing. And you wouldn't put a balancing topic in a teaser. That's not that exciting. Like, yeah, we're gonna make sure to balance things.
Mhm.
But then we see two new maps, and then we see solo queue, and I was like, oh well, these things could have easily been on the show. Why didn't they put it there? Um,
Yeah, and I think that we were saying, how visually people were tired of the same thing
mm-hmm.
in Shadowlands so far, that I think especially the Enigma arena it looks really cool. It's in
Yeah.
Zereth Mortis, so I think that showing more screenshots of the cool new zones would have been preferable. Like maybe the Mount
Hmm.
Raxus one, it's like, oh, we're used to this, but I definitely think that the anything
Yeah,
Zereth
while
Mortis
introducing
related
the
looks,
zone.
yeah,
Exactly. While introducing the zone, they could have introduced a PvP map that comes with it.
yeah. So yeah, it feels like, I mean, was this not ready in time?
Potentially, yeah.
Was it rushed? I mean, when they did the 8-2 reveal, I think it was much longer.
Hmm.
Maybe it was farther along, and it was also tied to, I think there was an influencer summit, so a lot of people did videos on systems um related
Hmm.
to the Azerite essences. So this definitely felt more incomplete, in which case I would have said, just like go all in on the lore and make it be like Warcraft 3, the story so far, and
Hmm.
explain more how this ties into Warcraft 3.
Hmm.
Um, like, if they want us to understand Sylvanas, I would have liked to hear more like, oh, you'll play through this quest with Sylvanas and finally understand her deal with the jailer. Like, that sort of stuff would get a lore person, I think, hooked on it. So,
Hmm.
yeah, there's sort of been this, like, weird in-between thing where, like, they don't want to go too much into narrative, but they emphasize narrative, and then they don't mention the systemsy things that the older players would appreciate. So it's definitely a fun experience having to go through all these interviews and be like, oh, that's a really big thing that we just sort of learned about out of the blue. Wow, that's exciting. Or like,
Yep.
you can fly in Zereth Mortis, you can unlock it through the cipher system. Oh, that's people I think would find that interesting after you couldn't fly in the Maw, for example, that,
Yeah, I was very
Zereth Mortis.
surprised to hear that.
Yeah. But it's
Like
like that was
designing new
another thing,
little.
like,
Hmm.
yeah. Like, I know that they showed like a few mounts flashing at the end, but highlighting like, Zereth Mortis is mysterious, and through the cipher of the first ones you'll unlock how to fly, and sort of like, just throw a few words into reach those concerns that players, always
Hmm.
have, like, can you fly in the zone? Like, what's up
Hmm.
with my legendary? Those sorts of things I think should be put into the video.
Hmm.
Um
Also, it's interesting on the topic of tier sets as well. Tier
mhm.
sets were mentioned in the 9.2.
Yeah.
Apparently, you are going to be able to craft them in one way or another. So technically, somebody who's not raiding can still get tier sets. And I thought
Yeah.
that was pretty interesting. I don't think that's been done before.
Yeah, so the sets will drop from the raid bosses. And
Hmm.
that will be the most direct way to get them. So if you raid, you'll get them the fastest, which
The
is
fastest,
again
most
like,
efficient way, which is how it
yeah,
should
which is
be
like
if you're raiding.
the
Yeah.
vibe of the old tier sets. But they say that you can take items from PvP and Mythic Plus, and you can turn them into tier pieces by using new currency that you
Okay.
can
So, like,
do stuff
upgrading
with
in a
in
way.
Zereth Mortis. Yeah,
Mm.
which, I think can also, a lot of people always felt that like Mythic Plus was, you had to raid in order to do Mythic Plus because you needed some of the items from the raid. So I do think that this isn't a bad idea. Um,
Okay, so it's yeah, so okay. So it's not crafting from scratch. It's more like a
right.
sort of upgrade system from other
Yeah.
parts of the game. Which makes it so that the other people don't feel forced to raid, which is a good
Right.
thing. But the most efficient way will probably still be the raiding.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, they said one of our goals was to reintroduce tier sets and to make it more
Mhm.
satisfying for players by giving them more agency in acquiring their tier
Yeah.
sets. In
Yeah.
Chains of Domination, many players told us how they still couldn't get their shards or bonuses they want after months of raiding. Um, and so they said that they added this Forge of Creation system to add a new currency. We normally might have added this in much later, but we wanted to introduce these systems earlier to give players a clearer roadmap. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah. I think it's a good step. I think, as usual, the important thing is to have this be testable on the PTR. Like, we heard about Azerite forever in previews, but we couldn't test it until very late, in the beta.
Yeah. Well,
So,
hopefully it's not as complicated as Azurite was,
right.
so it's difficult to get
Hmm.
wrong, right? Like,
Yeah.
surely it can't go wrong. It's like, I
Yeah.
remember, this is
Hmm.
really off topic, but going to a restaurant and I ordered salad, and I said to my friend group at the time, salad can never go wrong. And then there was
Oh.
too much vinegar in it. So, and I learned, hey, even salad can go wrong. But hopefully this is not the case. Tier sets are simple and can, you know, there's there is no way for it to go wrong, even if we don't test it in PTR. Um, that's what I would hope, at least.
Yeah.
Because the Azurite system was complicated and unnecessary and not tested, and then it became a disaster. And that was not good. That
Yeah.
was not
So,
good at all.
what do you think of the actual tier sets? Because the video mostly
Mm-hmm.
showed the concept art, and it was very glowy, very gold, very white. And then some of the press images didn't look as exciting, but they were a similar-ish color scheme. So I've seen a lot of people saying, did they show us like the heroic sets in the press releases, and the mythic ones have more
Mythic.
glow effects, and that's the concept art? Because I agree that the in-game images look a little more disappointing than the concept
They do.
art.
Yeah.
um
I'm gonna
and I
pull a
hope
couple
it's
images
not,
up.
oh well, people didn't like these sets, so I guess, no more tier sets. um
Yeah.
to me, they also don't really, maybe it's heroic, so they're toned down, but they don't really get across to me classes. Like, I look at these and I think, oh, this one looks like a Kyrian owl, or like this one looks kind of Maldraxxus. But yeah, most of these sets to me, I guess the white and gold, they just kind of scream Kyrian to me. Like, I don't
Yep.
really think classes. I just think like,
I agree. I
oh,
agree
it's the white and gold
because
covenant.
they all have a similar color palette, and
Yeah.
so these are the concept arts. These are not images from
Mhm.
the game itself, and they have a specific color palette. That are shared across the different classes. And I mean, it looks cool, but like you said, it doesn't really feel like, oh, this is class sets. This is more like kind of have the cloth and leather and plate sets have been as of lately, where they just
Right.
kind of fit the theme of whatever raid we're in. I guess the difference will be that they're actually going to have some kind of tier bonuses, which will make them feel more like actual classes. But in terms of visually, they just feel like they are from this raid, but not so much the class. With some of them, you
Exactly.
can definitely identify what class it is by just looking at
Mhm.
it because it has a bit of a hint towards it. But for a lot of them, they just look very similar. They still look pretty cool though in this sort of concept art. They look
Right.
glowy, like Perk said. This might be because maybe they're part of the mythic set, because the images that we
Right.
saw otherwise look very boring. They don't even look like tier sets. It's very disappointing
Yeah. They just kind
to
of look
see them.
like
Like here, this one for
Kyrian
example.
cosmetic armor. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like something I got from questing. The I think this is probably a rogue set because it's got the flashy, it's got the daggers and the flashy
Yeah,
face
yeah.
going on,
Yeah.
which
Mm.
looks a little bit cooler. But apart from the flashy feeling on the face and the weapons, it's very disappointing.
It
There's
looks
not
like
much
like
happening.
an Oribos dungeon set kind of,
Yeah,
which
it looks
is,
like a dungeon.
yeah.
Yeah, that's the perfect way of putting it. It looks like a dungeon
Yeah.
set. It doesn't look like, whoa, I really want to use this. I mean, even compare
Right.
this to many of the Mage Tower sets that are coming, like
Yeah.
the recolors, right? So that's like the sets from Legion, and that's a lot more exciting to look at because every class looks unique and different. This is like,
Yeah, we were
here's
just
a standard
saying,
set, and then slightly tweak it for each class.
yeah, like this even reminds me of like the Uldir sets, which were kind of like widely panned,
Yeah.
how the mythic versions look cool, but the others felt like kind of like incomplete.
Mm-hmm.
Um And I feel like there's potential to do really wild stuff with Zereth Mortis if they're talking about how they have all these like weird floaty things, and they're trying to go like over the top, and have it be like an aesthetic departure from past things. So I definitely think that the tier sets could be more daring as well.
Yeah.
Um, or like a lot of the characters in Zereth Mortis, a lot of the animals that are meant to be prototypes for Azeroth and other places, they've got these like weird shield things on, like interesting armor. I feel that if they wanted to go the whole, what if this was like the prototype of a class that they could have had like very fantastical elements, like maybe druids would have these creepy looking like stone leaves on them, or like shamans would have like very
Exactly.
stylized
More
wolves.
things. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like they could have been like, oh, what's the essence of the class and how can we show this in a weird exaggerated way, but these feel kind of understated.
Yeah. And yeah, and the main armors too. They look too similar to each other. Like they have some differences, but they look too similar to each other. Maybe this is because they weren't meant to be tier sets. Maybe they had a cloth version, they had a leather version, a
Yeah,
plate version, and the mid expansion decided we need to get tier sets back, and then decided to split it up into the further classes. Maybe
how with
I'm not sure.
Nathria it felt uh like the Venthyr got an extra like vampire Revendreth theme set. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then people were wondering if there would be a raid kind of themed around each zone. And then there was a speculation that the Curian would be the final raid, because it would sort of go back to, like Devos confronting them and like the Curian maybe being sinister. So these almost give me Curian vibes. Uh, maybe the story was meant to end there originally, or the Kyrians have very similar architecture. I guess the closest to Zereth Mortis with all the gold in the background. Um, but
Yeah.
yeah, I guess I just think Kyrian when I see all the white on gold effects and how so many of the sets have like the little like curly horns like the steward. Um,
Yeah, no,
yeah,
I see what you mean. I'm gonna put the concept art back up again. There we go.
yeah,
Yeah, no, it's actually true. I mean, and that's a good point too, because we're going to a new place like never before, the creator of everything. And we are getting sets that looks like what we've experienced already, like Bastion
mm.
slash Orbos. They don't look like that they don't look completely new in terms of
Yeah,
aesthetics. I mean, these concept arts at least look pretty good, but I'm worried
yeah.
about the pictures that we saw of the in-game versions of some kind. I'm not sure what it is. Maybe like a normal or heroic version of it, but it looks quite bland.
Yeah, I also have two more thoughts on that. The first thought is, if they're meant to be in a fantastical world, like, wouldn't it make sense for, I don't know, the sets to like defy gravity or
Exactly.
do weird things
Yeah,
like
do
Zereth
something
Mortis? And
weird.
that made me think,
Mm-hmm.
we had all those Covenant cloaks and back pieces that came from the tech and BFA with, the Rathian backpack. Like, shouldn't this be like a perfect time to have all sorts of
It's true.
weird
Mm-hmm.
glowy effects coming from your back and improving silhouettes? And then that also made me think we've had this very unpopular thing in Shadowlands where only the mythic set gets the glow effects, and then that kind of tanks the appeal of all the other sets. Like especially I think the Torghast Sanctum Mal set, the shoulders with the neon effects look awesome, but by themselves they look really bad.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's making me think, if the concept art looks cool because of the glowy effects, and that could be going away, then the sets look kind of drab, and we really need those back pieces then to, give them a distinctive look. So, yeah, I guess I'm gonna say I hope they keep glow effects for other difficulty tiers, and I think that this could be a good time to have interesting cape back pieces to um, make
Yeah,
things look a bit more unnatural and unique.
it's a good point. I mean, I think both shoulders, headpiece, and back
Mm.
piece could have definitely done some defying gravity type of things. We've seen
Yeah.
it in gear already, and if this is meant to be from this, over very different place, then I think it would be very fitting to have them there. And I think the lack of face here on this rogue looking set is pretty cool and speaks for that a bit. But the rest of the set looks boring. Looks like it's from a dungeon.
Yeah. Especially if the glow effect won't be as prominent on other difficulties.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so. But yeah, so. And yeah, I guess that's about it from what we learned about Zareth Mortis. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. You know, a lot of this stuff was
Mm-hmm.
also covered in interviews, not in the presentation, which again was only 10 minutes long. Like normally for BlizzCon, there was always like a 50-minute presentation announcing something.
Mm-hmm.
So this was pretty short.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we went over the story hints, the patch structure, how this is the final big story patch, maybe an epilogue, Sylvanas' role, the raid with Anduin and the jailer, Zareth Mortis, and maybe how the video didn't present it in a way emphasizing you could do stuff with legendaries and
Mm-hmm.
flying, and tier sets.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's mostly about it. I do know people
Yeah.
really like the snail mount at the end. Like the mounts and pets
Mm-hmm.
were very hype.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe
Yeah, I
this will
noticed
be a
that as
popular
well.
one for collectors.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One last comment on the tier sets thing. Even if the tier
Yeah, yeah.
sets end up looking not that great, I still think from like a gameplay perspective and everything that this is still 100% the right direction. I much
Yeah.
rather want to see this than a new system of domination gear or Azerite gear or any other kinds of like
Mm.
fancy gear types in terms of the use of how they work, the mechanic around them. Getting back to tier sets and having tier set bonuses is definitely the way to go. So that's good.
Yeah.
Because at the end
So
of the day,
for
most people are gonna be transmogging anyways. So it doesn't matter
right.
really how they look. Just as long as we have tier
Yeah.
sets, I'm quite happy. And sorry, I interrupted you.
I was just gonna say that we had one final bit of WoW news
Game
before the
news. Mm-hmm.
lawsuit stuff. And that was actually kind of positive, which was that the 17th anniversary in WoW had gone live, and Doomwalker was a New World boss, and he was dropping the mount, the Illidari Doomhawk, and a toy, and an interesting Akama weapon. And you could buy a new pet with the badges. But one thing that I know you were in favor of, Annie, was that the mount had a really low drop rate, and
Yeah.
it didn't really feel good if you were trying to like log on, especially as a casual or maybe someone that
Yeah.
resubbed after the lawsuit. And Blizzard hot fixed it to be 100% drop rate right
Yeah.
before the show,
Yeah.
as well
Um.
as the
Mm-hmm.
toy drop. So
Yeah.
yeah,
They're
people are
now
very
all
excited about
100%.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think that's really good. I'm not sure who made the decision, but I think this idea of having 1% drop chance mounts everywhere in the game is getting a bit too much, and then
mm,
seeing it on an anniversary event was actually quite upsetting for me as well as a collector,
mm,
as someone with over 2,000 attempts on the Love Rocket and everything. I got it in the end though, so at least it ended with a happy story. But having an event that goes away, an event which is meant to be a celebration, be something positive, especially in a rough year like this year after this summer. I was really upset about that, and I actually still have not killed it even once because I did not believe that it would stay like that, and I'm so glad that my
yeah,
hope was true, because indeed they did change it. They did change it, which is really good, and a little bit of faith. Although a lot of other things happened today, which still makes a lot of things sad, but at least a little bit of faith there was definitely restored in the dev team. Maybe I don't know the fact that they listened to the feedback and changed it, because again that's something else that there's been so many times in the past when we've been upset about something and we may have given feedback but nothing changed, and
right.
it changed again. So yeah, I just hope that this can continue, and I hope that the devs in general takes a second moment to think about these really rare drops, because there's so many of them in the game. We don't need that many of them.
Like the philosophy can change over time. Like when if there's one that's a rare drop, okay, but then when it's so many, it just like you just sort of give up, especially
Yeah.
if you're a more casual player that's like, hey, I want to do something fun and feel like I got something, not,
Mm-hmm.
just kind of wasting my time flying around Azeroth and didn't get anything.
Yeah, because that's what I was thinking too. Because at the end of the day, I do have my 50 alts that I could farm on every day, just have them parked there and log in, kill, log out. But I was also thinking from a point of view where you may not have that many characters and it's meant to be
Right.
a celebration event. It just felt so wrong. And I felt
And
like something is wrong about this. This does not sit right, and I'm glad that it was fixed. And it is now indeed 100% drop rate. So if you did kill it and did not get it today, don't worry. You will be able to kill it tomorrow and get it. Because it does not work retroactively. If you've already killed it, you are saved, but you can go again tomorrow and get it. Hello, Brightpop.
yeah, I got up to move him and he jumped into my chair. So now we're both in the chair.
Aww. It's like, thanks,
Yes.
Mom.
I
But yeah,
think this is
that
a
was a
good
really good
time.
update.
Yeah, I think this is a good time to transition because we have the cat here. So if we talk about something upsetting, he can be like a little
Oh,
stress relief.
Brightpop is ready to go on attack. Like, Mom, what
Yes.
happened this time? Well, well,
Yeah.
well. We had some news bombs.
Yeah.
Some
That's
news
the only way to
bombs,
put it.
to put it lightly. We
Yeah.
have an update on the Jen O'Neill situation, who left Activision, or at least she left Activision completely? Or do
She
you
is
want to
in
introduce what
she
did she do exactly? Mm-hmm.
So, right before the earnings call, I believe 2 weeks ago, we learned that Jen O'Neill, who was appointed co-lead several months back, resigned from the position, and she would leave Activision Blizzard officially at the end of the year, and she was in a transitional
That's
role
it.
for the rest of the year, as well as um, deciding how to handle a charitable donation
Yeah.
Blizzard had made in her name, and the money would go to help women in gaming.
Gotcha.
So,
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
um, her letter was it was professional, but we were always confused at the time because it's like, I've been so inspired by Blizzard that I'm going to leave and, do
Yeah,
something else. And
it did
it didn't
feel.
quite line up. Yeah.
Yeah, it felt a bit out of something felt wrong with it, because she talked about how she wants to make a bigger difference in for example, women in gaming or in this industry. And at the same time, she says that she wants to do that by leaving a very high role position, which is great to see. With a woman up there. So it felt a little bit contradictory in a way. We didn't really understand how her leaving is in any way better for any kind of war that we're fighting to make things better for women in the
Mm.
industry. It felt like what she's doing is the opposite of that. So we always had a suspicion that there was something else potentially going on, and now more information has been posted on her departure, and there's very,
Yeah,
very
it's
long
pretty upsetting.
articles on this now. And it is really upsetting. It's the
Yeah,
worst that we could have
so
expected.
Yeah, so I mean, it really touched upon everything horrible. In this quote from the Wall Street Journal, it's in August, Activision named a longtime employee, Jennifer O'Neill, to be Blizzard's co head, making her the first woman to lead one of the company's business units. The following month, she sent an email to a member of Activision's legal team in which he professed a lack of faith in Activision's leadership to turn the culture around, saying it was clear that the company would never prioritize our people the right way.
Yeah.
Miss O'Neill said in the email she had been sexually harassed earlier in her career at Activision and that she was paid less than her male counterpart at the helm of Blizzard and wanted to
Yeah.
discuss her resignation. I have been tokenized, marginalized, and discriminated against, wrote Miss O'Neill, who is Asian American and gay. And it's like, there's just everything is bad. Like, this sounds like an Onion headline. Like, Blizzard facing scrutiny over, you know, workplace harassment and discrimination and pay issues appoints woman and doesn't pay her enough. It's like, what? How? Like,
How can you make that mistake? Like
yeah,
I'm so confused. I'm so upset. I'm so I don't even like, could they not have at least, offered a massive raise to keep her? Like, how did it get this bad? I'm really confused.
yeah. And it's like, what happened? Because, like, if she's saying it was clear that the company would never prioritize her people the right way, it's like, what happened early on? Like, did she try to push for change? And they were like, oh no, like, just be like our token woman, we've solved the Blizzard issue. Like, did they just want her to like do nothing, or were they like, oh, be like the other co-lead, talk about playing WoW? Like, did they? It seemed like
Yeah.
she was trying to actually do the dirty work and get change, and they were, uh, Activision was blocking her in some way.
Yeah,
Um,
it sounds like it.
or that she thought maybe she could do change, and then she got there and learned that it was like really corrupt at the top level.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you know, it's also hearing that she was paid less than her male counterpart at Blizzard sends a lot of warning bells. Like, we always thought it was odd how they didn't release like joint statements, they didn't really release a roadmap of what their different responsibilities and specialties were, or like what they were focusing on. It was very weird how we never really saw her at the forefront, and then the other co-lead was always tweeting about WoW stuff, taking like a very, man of the people approach. And it's just, it was like, now reading that she wasn't paid as much, it's a very strange dynamic.
It
And it's
is.
like, so what are you going to do now, Blizzard? Like, did you just want to hire this person and pat yourself on the back for fitting a diversity box, and now you're going to just hire
Mm-hmm.
like no more women because they're difficult because they're upset they're not paid as much? Like, how did this situation just
Yeah.
seems very unsatisfying, especially when at the time people were discussing how Mike Ybarra was friends with one of the people mentioned in the lawsuit, Ben Kilgore, like tweeting how it was great to catch up with him, and like, people can change, but maybe like, you know he didn't have the greatest judge of character if this was the type of company he was with, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's good that there were other people in leadership positions to balance it out. Now it's like, oh, the guy who's friends with the person in the lawsuit is in charge. Like, wow, we've heard this before. uh
Yeah. Yeah.
so
No.
it's very
Exactly.
disappointing. So
It really is,
yeah.
because it blows my mind that there was no fix to this. It blows my mind that she wrote an email complaining about things and that this was not fixed when in the middle of all this mess. I don't understand. Like I don't even know. Like, I'm furious at how it's not possible to fix something like this when they're at the spotlight of everything.
It's like her,
How
it
they
seemed
can let
like,
her just
yeah,
leave without trying to fix anything.
it definitely feels that, looking back, that they gave her that money for the fund as like NDA, like, please be quiet, don't complain about us, here's like money to do your thing, hush money.
Yeah.
um but it's just like, how confident and cocky were they that they were just like, oh yeah, we're facing a lawsuit, our stock is in free
Yeah, so
fall,
it's
like,
okay if she
we'll
leaves,
ignore the woman. Like,
Yeah,
like, they didn't realize the
it
impact
blows my mind.
this would have. And I think like she symbolized a lot to many
Absolutely.
employees as like the face of change, or that it was good to have a different perspective, and it wasn't like she could like break the cycle of kind of like old boys club leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Um so yeah, and then the whole article was upsetting because while you can't 100% verify every claim because it was all anonymous, the Wall Street Journal was talking about how Bobby Kotick, like, he would ignore harassment allegations, or he would be unprofessional and make jokes like, I want to kill my assistant, or like,
Yeah.
he would be aware of people would say, oh, he didn't know every little thing, but he would be aware of things at the executive level, or like a lot of things took place under his leadership. And if we're talking about accountability and how Blizzard managers have to be fired for, knowing about bad behavior, even if they didn't do it, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, well, what's up with you, Bobby? Like, you were clearly aware of the email Townsend sent out. You
Yep.
were aware, I'd hope, that you appointed 2 co-leads for your studio and one was not paid as much. Like, he definitely, even under the most charitable thing where he wasn't like spearheading the evil campaigns, like he definitely knew what was going on and was okay approving this. And the article talks about how throughout the years how he has looked the other way on things or has intervened to save executives that were acting badly. And in all these stories, it keeps coming up that like there was a party and like people were being forced to drink and or there was alcohol on at the
Mm-hmm.
offices. And like this one line made me laugh because it's like, oh, a source says that, Activision plans on banning alcohol very soon. And I'm like, what? You just like
Banning?
drink? Like why is this in the future? I don't understand. like,
Yeah.
uh, so, but yeah, the whole thing was like a very searing indictment as to how, Bobby, for all his recent, oh, look at me, I gave up a yacht this year, I have a cheaper
How
salary, or
charitable. Yeah.
we want this to be the most inclusive company ever. It's like this was probably PR to get ahead of this article they knew was coming.
Did I read it right, by the way? Since the one of the articles that I was reading was very, very long, but did he write the draft that Townsend ended up?
Yeah, the so I mean, there's like different versions of the story floating around because Townsend never said he wrote the draft. She's like, "Oh, I got legal counsel to write it this way." So whether he
Yeah.
wrote it directly or um
Yeah. So it's not like
approved it,
100%. Yeah.
yeah, like whatever his involvement was, it clearly was not good judgment because he did not see a problem with this statement. With
Yeah,
that was
because
very bad.
then he made a statement later and made it seem like he's understanding,
Yeah,
which must have just been because everyone was, quite
yeah.
upset.
But if it's like,
If
oh,
he was already
this
aware
WoW
of this one.
manager can't remain because they let this behavior happen under their watch. It's like, okay, well, you let the other executives write this horrible thing under your watch, Bobby, so shouldn't
Yeah.
you be accountable as like the manager for the other, executives
Yep.
that you oversee?
Yep. Yep.
Um so yeah, so this was just and of course the stocks just went into free fall after this came out. Like just looking at how the stock market went,
Yeah.
it was at so it was up to 71 earlier today, and then it just went down to like 65. Like it just
Yeah.
that thing came out and it just dropped again.
Mm-hmm.
And then this kicked off a whole bunch of news, such as Bobby was like, "Oh, look, I have my prepared statement," and he responded and he sent the employees a video of himself talking in this empty room about how much he like values the future. um but it's such a bad letter, like it's just looking
Yep.
at it, like
So they're
the letter
dismissive.
says, he's like, I love diversity, I love being inclusive, it helps us be more productive. And then he's like, oh, but the Wall Street Journal sucks. Like, he literally is like, you know, this article paints an inaccurate and misleading view of our company, of me personally, and my leadership. And then
Mm-hmm.
in the Frances Townsend email, when this all broke, she called the California lawsuit a distorted and untrue picture of our company, including factually inaccurate, old, and out of context
Yes,
stories.
suddenly it
I'm
sounds
like,
like
wow,
Bobby tends to say this, you know?
yeah, this sounds very
I see
similar.
the relation.
Yeah. Yeah,
I see how they
so
could both be written by the same person.
yeah, and like it just has this vibe of damage control. Um, and the
Mm-hmm.
statement is also bad because it he it glosses over the details of the accusations. Like it doesn't mention at all that Jen O'Neill left due to lack of faith with the leadership or the claim that she was paid less than Mike Ibarra. Like
Yeah.
you'd think that like Bobby would have accountability because he would obviously need to approve, know what's going on with the co-leads. And
Mm-hmm.
this is also particularly embarrassing because at the earnings call, they were talking how, like, oh, we want to be transparent about the salaries that our employees make. And actually, women make, like, very slightly more than, men do. And it's just funny how it's like, oh, well, not Jen.
Yeah,
She was
not
not,
Jen. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
Uh, So it just undermines
It's
what
really
they are talking
embarrassing.
about. Yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
remember last year how there was, before this all broke, how um different groups were criticizing Blizzard for not trying to implement better, like, diversity or hiring measures at the executive level, that Blizzard was okay doing it up to a certain amount, but then at the top level they're like, no, we're fine. And now it's like, well, no, you're clearly not fine because you hardly have any, like, women at the top level, and you're sort of like
She
hitting
quit.
this glass ceiling. Yeah, and she quit. So
Yeah.
they look really bad here.
Yeah. Really
Um
disappointing.
yeah.
And then we
And
have,
then
as if there's not more,
yeah.
more things to be disappointed by. The board apparently supports Bobby.
Yeah.
And,
So the board of directors
mm-hmm.
said that under his leadership, the company is already implementing industry-leading changes, including a zero-tolerance harassment policy, except with him, a dedication to
Ooh.
achieving significant increases to the percentage of women and non-binary people, and significant internal and external investments to accelerate opportunities for diverse talents. The board remains confident that Bobby Kotick appropriately addressed workplace issues brought to his attention. The
Mm-hmm.
goals we have set for ourselves are both critical and ambitious. The board remains confident in his leadership, commitment, and ability to achieve these goals. Which is wild because it's like you just had the Asian American gay woman resign as co-lead because she thought the company was bad, and Blizzard just like, oh yeah, but trust us, we'll hire diverse talent. Like it just
Yeah.
like her
Yeah.
leaving is very symbolic that Blizzard is not welcoming to people that are not represented in
Even
the
at that
industry in
level.
several ways. Yeah.
Yeah, like it blows my mind that it's even at that level, because at that level you can't really be abused by superiors, uh, like at the
Yeah.
same, like at the same extent as somebody
Right.
who is, a lot lower down in the ladder. So it blows my mind that she felt the need to quit, because that means it's really bad. Really
Yeah.
bad.
It's like systemic, and I think it comes from Bobby. Like he's the guy at the top.
Mhm.
People look up to him. If he's
Mhm.
if he's like dodging accountability, or always has an excuse, or looks the other way, um, or hires his friends that, or, maybe it's not merit based, but people in like political positions, it's going to influence things in negative ways. He's leading by example, and it's a shitty example. And then
Yeah, pretty
um
much well said.
yeah
He's leading by
and then
example, and it's a shitty example.
yeah
I like that.
And then Bloomberg also got a message from Activision Blizzard, from a spokesperson who said that the Wall Street Journal presents an inaccurate and misleading view of the company and ignores important changes. And the constant desire to be better has always set this company apart. And I'm just like, that sounds ridiculous. Like, oh, they didn't praise us enough for how we're trying to clean things up. Like that's not how it works.
Yeah.
And it's like, what do you like? The constant desire to always be better has set it apart. It's like, no, you have a lawsuit document on how the constant factor was treating people really badly in the name of making money. Like that's
Yeah.
it's like no, it's not a tradition of being better. It's a tradition of you know, not treating people well unless it's like a boys club.
I
Uh
think that it's just been, I think it's difficult for us to imagine, but there's just been so many years of this kind of thing probably ending up on the surface and then kind of being forgotten and not so
right.
much spotlight on it. I think that's the only reason that they would do something like this, that they keep thinking it's gonna be, brushed under the rug. Don't worry, people will forget in a week. And it's probably been true. It's probably been true for over a decade that these things have come up to the surface and some people have been aware, but then it's just been brushed under the rug and then people forgot in a couple of weeks and then nobody talked about it again. This is a really random example, but how apparently Mike Morheim had to apologize for the appearance of was it a musical
Yeah,
artist or something,
yeah,
like something,
Finder for
yeah.
the homophobic slurs and
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. Something like that so long ago. You did an apology a week later and nobody knows about it. Like, I don't know about it. So most people either don't hear about it or just forget about it. And I think there's been a constant repetition of this type of events over the years that they probably still think that they can keep getting away from it. I don't think they understand
Like
how bad the situation is right now when California, it's a outside state that's involved in this, which is giving it so much attention. And it's in a year when people are still kind of in the pandemic. Things are, opening up a bit, but it's still somewhat pandemic time. People have more time on the internet to read about all these things. People are a lot more angry. They have their own life frustrations. They take it out on these kind of things that happen. It's not going away now. You can't just hide it under the carpet and think it's fine. And I think
and
they
like
keep forgetting that.
people are also more mature. Like it's not like, oh, I'm 20 years old, you know, Blizzard is amazing. I idolize things. Like people are more
That's
mature
true
and they can be
too.
like, hey, that's kind of weird. Or, you know, I have more money. I could play another game besides WoW if I don't like what's going on.
Very
Like
true.
I'm a
Yeah.
more informed
Yeah.
consumer. Or now
And
it's
there's
like,
so
oh,
many
well,
good games out there
yeah,
too. Because
yeah.
when WoW first came out, there actually weren't that many games out there to play. There weren't that many options. But now there's so many different games and so many new games coming out all the time as well. Even if half of them are barely complete and full of bugs and everything. There's so many games out there. So many amazing games. So many single player games that are massive in themselves, massive RPGs with their own sort of sequels and everything. There's so many options. It's not the same as 10, 15 years ago.
That there's like this sense of guilt, like, you know, Blizzard's a family and you can never critique the game because like you're
Yep.
not being a fan and you're not being a good community member, or you know, then they point to someone who is clearly trolling and it's like, oh well, you know, if you give feedback that means you're like being mean and, you know, trolling like this horrible over the top person. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it sort of uh people just didn't have constructive criticism of the company for a while because it was associated with this sense that you know, if you critique, you were being over the top and ridiculous, or you know, you just had to be nice and fit in if you were a Blizzard fan. Like if you were, you know, a fan of the studio for life, you went to BlizzCons, you played them for 20 years, like you had to just fit into this mindset. And I think as people have gotten older and they try out different games, and now they're like, oh yeah, well, I have a job and I'm paid a lot more than a Blizzard person. Huh, maybe it's not so wonderful there. Blizzard keeps messing up. You know, last year the salary got some momentum, and then this year it's like you just can't avoid it. And you can see with the statements made today that they're almost getting away with it. You know, they're like,
or they
you
think they
know,
are.
putting yeah, they're putting down the Wall Street Journal. They're like, why aren't they reporting on this, you know, good thing we're doing? They're trying to balance out the negative PR with things like, oh, look, they have a few more days off for Thanksgiving, or oh, look, Bobby, you know, took a pay cut. They think they know what they're doing, and it's just it's so bad and shocking. Like, and
Yeah.
it's just just going back to the statements. Like, I'm just so angry on Jen O'Neill's behalf that they're just pretending that her complaints and letter didn't exist. They're just like, you know, why is this letter bringing up old things from Bobby's past, or uh,
Yeah.
making us look bad and not highlighting our diversity initiatives. And it's like, you're just gonna like not address the elephant in the room of the co-lead that left and was very
He
upset.
didn't mention her at all, right?
No, no one
Which was the
is.
main point of the article.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, and it feels so disrespectful how their take is doubling down as people aren't, appreciative of our efforts enough. Not, wow, we fucked up and had a co-lead lead, and she'd be someone that we'd want to keep on for, several diversity reasons and initiatives. And like, it looks so bad. Like, how is Blizzard going to be taken seriously if the co-lead is like, it's not possible here, it's not working?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't
Or it's like,
understand
oh, maybe,
how she can come forward and say it's not working and they don't fix it. In the
yeah,
middle of
like that
all this
sounds,
spotlight, like, how? How do they not address whatever she was saying at that point? Like, at
yeah.
that point, she actually has so much power because they put her there, because they know that her words are going to mean so much when a lot of these harassments have been against women, especially. Uh,
Yeah.
and they didn't. They just let her leave and then pretend like she doesn't exist.
Yeah. It's like Blizzard's technique of, oh, like if we just ignore it, it will go
Ignore.
away.
Yeah.
And yeah. And then, meanwhile, the Blizzard co-lead, like his whole Twitter is all like, here's my Arthas statue, happy 20th Xbox. And it's like, oh, do you have anything to say on this serious topic? Because again, he's not saying anything. So in his silence, people are like, oh, you know, who does he support? Then, people start saying, oh, he didn't respond to my work question. He, didn't attend this meeting. He didn't address this issue. And it's not a good look if the people remaining are either ignoring Jen or active but talking about like very like superficial things in comparison to company culture.
Yeah.
um and like the timing of this, like, it's really unfortunate because um the Jen resigning overshadowed 915, and then today had big Hearthstone announcements and Season of Mastery. And
Yeah.
I think, we're due for 9-2 PTR any day. And, instead we are talking about um, this article. And people were really excited that Blizzard gave them the whole week off. And now it's like, oh, were they just doing this to, balance this news they knew was coming? I think you might be
It's a
muted.
lot to take in. No, I'm actually
Yeah.
just thinking.
Yeah.
Oh,
So, but yeah.
yeah.
In slightly positive news, the ABK Workers Alliance staged a walkout, and
The walkout was due to this, right? Or was it planned
yeah,
before it?
no, it was just well, that's it's interesting because when Jen resigned, no one at the company knew in advance. It just was like,
Yeah.
bye.
Yeah.
Uh, and they they said, we have instituted our own zero tolerance policy. We will not be silenced until he has been replaced as CEO, and we continue to hold our original demand for third-party review by an employee chosen source. We are staging a walkout today. We welcome you to join us. And not as many people showed up, probably because uh, no real notice on things. We've got Season of Mastery launching, people have stuff to
Yeah.
do. But they did post pictures where there were like, I want to say like 200 people in front of the Blizzard gates, which seems pretty sizable for
200?
something very, yeah, with like,
Yeah. I
pretty
mean, that's still a
spontaneous.
lot. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And yeah, so I don't know if they're going to meet this goal, but I think it's uh, a good show of solidarity. And yeah, it's just imagine if you're like if you're at Blizzard, I think people were even starting to go back onto campus. I saw people like posting pictures of stuff, and it's like if you're a new employee at Blizzard and like this is your second day at work and everyone's like, "Oh, we're going to the walkout," or "Oh,
Yeah.
there's our CEO in the Wall Street Journal. Oh, our stock's going down. Like, will this affect my holiday bonus?" Like it must be a
Yeah, it
very
must be
stressful
scary.
environment. Yeah.
Yeah,
And then
absolutely.
like it's just demoralizing too, like if you're just trying to work on a product and you're looking forward to it and gets overshadowed by the lawsuit, like it doesn't feel good.
Yeah, that
Um
that as well. Like I'm sure a lot of devs were, especially the classic team, must have been really excited to get this season of Mastery out because it's something new. It's classic,
yeah,
which is old, but it's a little bit of a twist on classic. So I'm
right.
sure a lot of them were, proud and happy to get this out today, and then it's overshadowed by the people at the top. And yeah, it's just because I guess in a way, Blizzard has, to some extent at least, been cleansed. It's still being worked on, but it's a good progress into the cleansing of it with improving salaries and having these holidays that people are looking forward to, and changes in the game are so far looking good. And it's remains to see how continuous this becomes, but it's starting to look positive. And then now it's at the even higher end of the co leadership, with Jen not feeling like this can be fixed. The environment cannot be fixed. The culture can't be fixed. And then seeing how it's a problem on even higher levels, with Bobby not even acknowledging it, and it's really disappointing.
Feels so frustrating that you're trying to do what you can at a small level, and maybe you're making change, or you're having like fruitful discussions about being more respectful in the workplace and changing the systems that you can, and then you know executive management just doesn't care and is just messing things up on a huge level beyond your control. Like that has to feel bad.
Yeah,
Like, I don't remember
absolutely.
after Riot's allegations, I don't remember Riot having like this constant drawn out mess. Like I
Yeah,
thought they were it's just like this seems uniquely bad to Blizzard. It's like we were sort of joking, work is like, well, what could they do next, a few weeks ago? Like it must be stabilizing. Like what else is there to come out? And it's like, oh, I guess you could go to the very top and have a scandal with the co-lead, I guess. It's like leave no stone under, and like everything at Blizzard just seems tainted by this.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's really sad.
So yeah, so that's our news for the week. Season of Mastery just went live on a high note, but yeah, it's just like
Oh
weird from a
yeah, I see the
personal
tweet.
level
It's
too,
out now.
because like like you're trying to cover this objectively and also accurately, but then it's such a personal topic that it's easy to feel like sad, like you just sort of need a minute to step back and clear your
Absolutely.
head. It's not like 9-2 where there is a bunch of information and you need to worry about it looking nice. It's like a lot of information, and then it reminds you of like being treated badly yourself in the gaming industry, maybe by people at Blizzard, or like discrimination, and it's just very difficult. And especially when you see someone like Jen O'Neill feeling like she just didn't see a future for herself at the company, like that's just so demoralizing personally.
Yep.
So it's been like really rough having to cover and write this news, especially when no one knows this news is coming. So like I wake up, I'm like, oh yeah, I'll get an early start, work on Wowhead weekly notes, and it's like, whoa, actually no, I'm going to just like do sensitivity reads on
Yeah.
articles for this whole morning, and like be ambushed by all these negative feelings and bad memories of similar experiences. Like it's like exhausting, like you can't even like mentally prepare yourself because this
It really
news is like
is.
always happening and it's a surprise.
I was just thinking about
So
the difference between Riot and Blizzard here as well, and Blizzard has been around for longer, right? Before League of
yeah,
Legends, did Riot have a big game, or was League of Legends?
no, it was just
Okay.
League of Legends.
And I quickly checked, and it says that League of Legends launched in 2013. I don't know if it became popular immediately, but regardless, that's still, almost 10 years after WoW or after Warcraft.
Yeah.
And I think it just means that Blizzard has, rooted itself a lot longer time for a lot of people. And also, an MMO is always closer to heart than a competitive game that you jump in and out of. And on top of that, BlizzCons have been quite, meaningful and personal experiences for people, maybe because they first met their guildmates or other kinds of friends or other kinds of relationships. I think all of these things means that people, like you said, idolize the Blizzard in many ways. And I think that's also why a lot of these things were just swept under the rug and they're suddenly coming out and it's 10 20 years later. But I think that's why. I think it's because it's just been there for so long and it's been loved for so long that it was always
And
ignored.
Blizzard always try to cultivate their personal brand that, they were the game studio that didn't really lay people off and that people could like plan for a solid future if they worked at Blizzard more so than other companies, and they would wait until the game was, you know, perfect to release it. But now in retrospect, they weren't paying people that well, and maybe the games were delayed not because they were perfect, but because you had like people with huge egos in charge, um, maybe creating, dramatic things or not listening to people that had
Mm-hmm.
some of these good ideas.
Yeah.
Like it just puts it into perspective. And also with BlizzCon, it's like, oh, you can be a Blizzard gamer for life, look at all these different games, different generations of gamers. And they tried to build themselves as something unique and sort of above the problems of the gaming industry, but like they
Mm-hmm.
were generating a lot of these problems themselves.
Mm-hmm. I think that's
So,
why, because Riot had their own scandal not very long ago. And
yeah.
it's funny because when I read some of these articles or tweets and whatnot, people are like, yep, I'm done with Blizzard. I'm going to go play League of Legends. And it's like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it's just
it's an
uh
industry problem. But
yeah.
obviously it's more upsetting when it's a company that you've been following for so long. But it is funny that people just forget
Yeah,
or
like
like
people
don't
try to make
care.
a company their identity, and it's just like, yeah, you should probably just try not to do that with anything. It's not like, oh, I'm no longer a Blizzard fan. I'll, stake my online identity as a fan of a different game. It's like, no, you should maybe just try to be like a good person first and like pick and choose elements from different games you like and be informed, but don't tie your entire identity to a game and then be shocked when, a mega corporation is actually evil. Like that's probably not the best thing to do.
Yeah.
Um but yeah, I'm sure over the course of the week more follow-ups will occur.
Yeah.
Um
Like one piece
I'm
of
sure,
news always opens up like another 10
yeah,
other
like
stories.
when Fran Townsend wrote that email sort of doubling down that things were
Yeah.
fine, that led to everyone coming forward being like, actually, they're not fine. So I'm sure if Bobby says that, I've always acted wonderfully, people will suddenly come out of the woodwork saying that he hasn't.
Actually, you're not.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
I saw people working at Blizzard who were already upset seeing that the board
Mm,
was with him. So I am
yeah.
expecting more things to come out in the next few days, probably. And
Yeah, or now that everyone is free over Thanksgiving, you have more time to
yeah.
organize
Mm-hmm.
and come up with something unified.
Yep.
So,
Indeed.
yeah.
And I think
But
with that,
yeah,
we actually have a wrap on the show.
yeah, not the direction I thought the show was gonna go in at 7 a.m. this morning, but it did.
Yep.
But yeah, thanks for sticking with us with this difficult topic to discuss. We appreciate everyone being respectful about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And hopefully some better news in the days to come. But it's looking pretty
Yeah,
grim. Looking pretty
yeah.
grim on Activision side at least. Well, I guess Jen O'Neill is still Blizzard, kind of. Well, I mean, the appointment and the salary decisions and anything regarding at that level would be Activision problem, right?
Uh, yeah. I mean that she was at the very top of Blizzard, so
Yeah,
all the
so her
salary approval
problems,
and that stuff.
yeah,
Yeah,
would be Activision problems. Okay, so it's correct to say that it's an Activision problem, but obviously it does boil down to culture at Blizzard too. Um,
right.
but yeah, thank you guys very, very much for watching, and we will be back next week with whatever follow ups that we have then.
Yeah. So maybe we'll have data mining next week. We'll have to see.
Oh, yeah, because there might
But
be a
yeah,
PTR.
yeah. Well, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if ever, probably not with this chaos, but maybe later in the week we'll see.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I
so
lost my page, but there was a resub. Okay, here.
let me. All right.
I think I found it. Yeah, here. There were two resubs. We got
Oh,
Macken with the 27-month resub. Thank you very, very much for that. And we got JD Saphir with 67 months.
oh, awesome!
That's a
We
really
have a
long time.
cattail. He's celebrating.
Yeah, Brightpaw is also appreciating.
He's waving his butt at everyone.
Yeah. Thank you guys
He's
so much
like,
for watching.
yeah, he's trying to cheer everyone up. He's like, look at
Yeah.
me, I'm happy.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, we'll be back next week. Take care,
Yeah.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye bye. Bye, Brightpaw.